So you heard a discussion this morning about water that made you, perhaps, certainly made me think that water would be a top priority this session, but we know that higher ed will be, as it always is, a top priority as well. You have a captive audience. You have a lot of people who work in policy, who think about Texas State, but think about higher ed more broadly. Give them reason to believe that higher ed will be, should be, as much of a priority for a legislature that has cut its share of support for higher ed over the last couple of years. Why should the legislature care? Educate all of us about that.
The legislature, in my opinion, should care for a very simple reason. Because if you have $1 to spare, the single best place you can put it is education, whether you're talking about pre-K all the way up through college. We know that people who go to college are more successful in getting jobs, but we also know that they vote more, they're healthier, they're less likely to smoke, for example.
Yep.
They participate in democracy to a greater extent than people who don't have a college education. So for me, it's not a complicated issue.
Yeah.
It's a fabulous investment.
Yeah, and it's not so much about Texas State itself, although obviously you love it when those dollars come to Texas State or to the system. It's about higher ed generally.
Absolutely.
But surely you understand this is not higher ed or not higher ed. It's not a referendum, it's a choice, as they say at election time. Those dollars are limited. There's a finite number of those dollars. In fact, the unrestricted portion of the budget is itself a percentage of those finite dollars. And you are in competition with public ed, you're in competition with healthcare, you're in competition with water. The reason we're here today to fight for those same finite dollars. How do you make the case for higher ed versus those issues? Why is this more of a priority?
I think Texas is at a very important crossroads right now if you look at the demography of the state.
Yep.
I think one of the things that Texas did right about 10 years ago was forthrightly putting the Closing the Gaps program out there.
Yes.
Closing the gaps, bring more people into higher education in the state of Texas so as to stay at the median.
Right.
That's all that Closing the Gaps does, is keeps us at the median.
Right.
But along with that, I think Texas was very forthright, as Texas tends to be, about the fact that it is the Hispanic population that is growing the fastest in Texas and that historically is underrepresented in college.
Yep.
And if we don't bring those young people into higher education now, 20 years from now, is when the state goes in the ditch.
So as a percentage of your enrollment, I've looked at the statistics on our very website, and I see that back in 2001, about 18, maybe 19% of your enrollment was Hispanic. Today it's about 26, 27%.
That's right.
So it's gone up by about 50%. You are still a campus that is more than 2-to-1 Anglo to Hispanic. Other campuses around the state are quite a bit more Hispanic in their enrollment, and they project to get even more so. What do you need to do as a campus, understanding that the population is moving inexorably in the direction of being Hispanic majority? How do you make the sale to Hispanics, not just in Central Texas, but around the state, that this is the place to be?
What I say to Hispanic young people and their parents is Texas State University wants you. In 2004...
Well, what's the implication of that? That UT and A&M doesn't want them?
Well, in 2004, we put it in our strategic plan that we would become a a Hispanic serving institution.
Yeah.
We said it forthrightly. We hired admissions counselors to be in Houston, the Valley, San Antonio, Dallas. Right. We put money into that initiative because we didn't just want demographics to wash over us. We wanted to say to a Hispanic young person, if you're smart and you're doing well in high school and you want to be successful in college, come to Texas State University. Because if you look at our retention rates and our graduation rates, they are the same across ethnicities, and not every school can say that.
Right. This is not like UT or A&M, which are the UT in Austin and A&M in College Station, which are the flagships of a system, and where kids who apply to the flagships and don't get in, well, there's the possibility of regional campuses. The university system that you're part of is set up a little bit differently. This is not, although many people mistake, I have in the past mistaken Texas State for a, quote, flagship in a literal sense. It's not. So you're really operating essentially you versus the other schools in your system as well for the Hispanic population, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we track students who apply to Texas State and who don't come to Texas State.
Right.
And we find that the students who we accept who don't come here tend to go, first of all, to A&M. And after that, UT,
Right.
Texas Tech, and UTSA. So that's the main competition.
What does that tell you?
Well, it tells us that students want to go to a large university, they want to go to a research university,
Yep.
they want to go to a residential university.
Yep. And you can provide, obviously, as much as you can in those areas and be as competitive as you can be with those guys. You mentioned the graduation rate. I've watched your graduation rate over time. I know that there's a conversation to be had, maybe we'll have it, about whether the 4-year graduation rate is an obsolete metric of success these days. In the old days, it was 4 and out, or that was the goal. And the fact is, a lot of non-traditional students enter schools like Texas State and, for whatever the reason, take longer to graduate. I believe as of 2010, your 4-year graduation rate, first-time, full-time students, was just under 30% of your kids got out. Now, I've become conditioned not to expect much from the 4-year graduation rates of this state. In fact, you're one of the highest among the many campuses that, that the Higher Education Coordinating Board tracks. But still, that means that more than 70% of your students who enter first-time, full-time do not leave in 4 years. Is that cause for alarm?
I don't think so, because the difference between the 4-year and the 6-year graduation rate, and it's the 6-year graduation rate that we look at, and that we are the 5th highest in Texas among the publics.
That's in the upper 60%, is that right?
Yeah, it's about 60%.
Or about 60%, okay.
But when you say 6-year graduation rate, that picks everybody up who took 1 extra summer,
right,
4 years plus a summer, or 1 semester or 2 semesters, all the way up to 6 years.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean every student in the 6-year graduation rate.
It's just more than what would have been 4 years.
It's more than 8 semesters.
Right, and do you accept the idea that 4-year graduation rate may not really be a true measure of how colleges are doing, universities are doing, and getting kids through and out?
Well, I will tell you, we are working really hard to get our students to graduate faster.
Right.
But I do believe at a time when 70% of our students work, and nationwide it's about 70%, taking a little bit longer than 4 years isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. President Natalicio at UTEP, who I know you know, talks about it in terms of a local train and an express train. That there are some kids who are on the express train, but given circumstances, it may have to do with family, it may have to do with work, it may have to do with the fact that they've gone to school much later than some of their colleagues in school have. Some of them, by necessity, have to be on the local train, and that we should not denigrate their experience. They ultimately get to the same destination. That's becoming, it seems like, more of a philosophy that college presidents embrace.
Well, we have a lot of different kinds of students here. And for many of our students who come in as 18-year-old freshmen, they should graduate in 4 years.
Right.
And we are working hard. We have a brand new freshman advising initiative that's working hard to get them to do that.
Right.
But we also have as many freshmen who come in here, we have that number of transfer students.
Yeah.
And those transfer students are all over the place in terms of how old they are, what their educational background is, how much they have to work. And for a lot of them, it's not realistic to graduate in 4 years.
Right, so just better to get them out in however long it takes, as opposed to forcing the issue of 4 years.
Yes.
The cost piece is obviously related to this, because you hear a lot these days about the size of, nationally, of college debt. In fact, by one statistic I saw, college debt is now outpacing credit card debt in this country. And the longer that kids stay in school, the more likely they are to incur more debt. And so there's a cost rationale or a price rationale for them to get out more quickly, or at a minimum for the university to understand the need to keep costs down. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. In fact, there's a wonderful article in the Chronicle of Higher Education last week that really dives deeply into this whole notion of student debt. Nationwide, the average debt of a student graduated from a 4-year institution is $26,000.
Nationwide.
Nationwide.
Yeah.
You hear these numbers, 50,000, 75,000, 100,000. Nationwide, it's 26. At Texas State, it's 21,000.
21, just under the average.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, would we like it to be lower than that? Yes. But 21,000 is a doable amount of debt when you realize, and this article brings out the same point, that the average entry-level job for a college graduate in America for the 11 cohort was $43,000. That's the average for an entering college graduate.
Right.
So, 21,000 debt, 43,000 in your entry-level job. That, to me, that's not all that disproportionate.
Yeah. You think that the cost of an education here is the right price? You know, there's cost and there's price. Those things don't necessarily align. But let me ask what you think. Do you think that it's priced properly?
I wish that the support that we get from the state of Texas has not been decreasing the way it has been decreasing.
Right.
It's decreased in the 10 years I've been here. It's decreased 15
significantly.
Yeah, percent.
You put that on you put this question of price on the legislature. So any family feeling particularly burdened by the price of an education here or elsewhere, tell it to the legislature. That's your thought?
I don't know if it's just the legislature. I think I tell it to the Texas populace, because I'm not sure you can put the whole burden on the legislature. They reflect the population of Texas.
Well, that's the theory anyway.
And I'm sticking to that theory.
Are you sticking to that? Okay, good. Yeah. As they say in the 4th grade, I may ask you to show your work on that one, but I grant you the point. Yeah. So you think that really, if the public was dissatisfied with the contribution of the state to higher education, then the public would break out its pitchforks and torches, and then the legislature would act differently?
I think that's how it works.
Is that right? Yeah. What have you done? You know, the governor has been, as I know you're quite aware, the governor has been harping on the cost of an education and the price of an education in the state, calling in 2011 in his State of the State for a $10,000 college degree, including books. More recently at University of Texas at Dallas, I think it was, making a speech to the effect that he believed it was important for every entering college student to be told on day one or before day one, this is what the 4-year education is going to cost you, so that you can reasonably know what you're in for. Is he wrong to be pressing those things?
No, I do think that students, prospective students, and their families need to be doing more research. We live in a day and age when you can get an answer to any question by Googling it. I mean, you can find out, is what I'm going to major in a low-paying job, a middle-paying job, a high-paying job? You can find these things out, and if it's important to you, I think you should find those things out.
Right, but what the governor is saying on that second point, I'll come back to the first and the second president, is he wants you all to say, with reasonable certainty on day one or day zero as a freshman enters this school, we know what we're going to do to tuition here for the next 4 years. And of course, that's a system function as much as it is a campus issue. But do you agree with that in principle, that the students have a right and families have a right to know going in what the cost is going to be?
I believe, first of all, let me say that our system is working with us on a plan, and we will be stepping up to that. Now, to some extent, it's a hedge. But if it's very, very important to you to know on day one what it's going to cost for 4 years, yes, I think that should be an option that you have. But if you look at UT Dallas, which is the school in this state that pioneered in that effort, they also have the highest tuition in the state.
Yeah, they're a pretty expensive school.
Because you have to have a predictability, and the predictability has to take into account the fact that inflation will occur and that budget cuts will occur from the legislature. I mean, speaking for our institution, we have taken a $24 million budget cut.
And you all were a pretty lean budget to begin with, compared to some other schools.
Yes, we are. If you take the 38 universities in Texas, 4-year institutions, we are third from the bottom in terms of funding per student credit hour.
So the cut really affects you all
big time,
disproportionately.
Big time.
Right. So how about the first point? You know, the governor was ridiculed by some people for suggesting that you could get a 4-year college education for $10,000 with books that you'd want. I suppose it's possible to get one, but the question is, would you get one that you'd want? And yet I keep hearing, after that ridicule has abated, this campus, that campus, that campus are actually stepping up to offer some kind of a product like that that would be priced competitively.
Yes.
What about that?
Well, I think, again, for some students, it is the right thing. I just was spending some time with someone from UT Arlington recently, and they have put one together. Now, what it requires is that you take many, many hours while you're a junior and senior in high school in the early college entry program.
Right, which are proliferating. Those are happening much more frequently around the
all
state.
over. And those tend to be community college hours, but not necessarily. And then that you go to a community college, and then you come to UT Arlington for the end of your program. And I believe it's discipline specific. And we have one in our system that is that way at Sol Ross. It's discipline specific. It requires you to take a lot of hours at a community college, but then at an appropriate time you transfer.
It can be done.
It can be done. Is that right for everybody? No. It's not. That's why it's important to have a lot of options.
Well, this is why you hear a lot of people in higher ed, I wonder if you agree with this, President, talking about how we can't just be thinking about 4-year full-time institutions. There've got to be community colleges in this conversation.
Yes.
There've got to be technical schools in this conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
Whatever people do to continue their education after high school, we should value and we should support.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. We, in our system,
Yeah.
we have 2-year schools. I was at down on one of the campuses recently and looking at their welding program.
Yeah.
It is remarkable what welders make,
And
the
we
salaries.
and we need welders.
And that's right, we absolutely do.
Yeah.
And that's an important niche for them to be in.
So don't denigrate that. That's
Not at all.
all part of the mix.
Not at all.
Another thing the governor has talked about as part of this effort to talk about price and cost is efficiency. The governor has said in a more blanket way, a lot of the public universities in the state have faculty members who don't teach very many students. They do research, but they don't actually teach. And if you look at the dollars being brought in through the tuitions of their enrollees, there are some faculty members who are paid several $100,000, but they don't bring back to the university very much. Do you want to get into this fight with the governor about research and efficiency?
No one on our faculty makes several $100,000, but again,
Maybe he was talking about A&M.
we have the highest student teacher ratio in the state.
Yeah.
At 29 to 1, we're the highest in the state, but I would remind you, we have the 5th highest graduation rate in the state. What
Right.
that says to me is that our faculty come to work every day and work really, really hard with students because to have that kind of a load, teaching load,
Yep.
and to have that much success at the other end takes people who are really dedicated.
So no efficiency problems here as far as you're
Well, we couldn't get a higher student-faculty ratio. I mean,
Right.
we are
That's-
the highest.
That's pretty efficient.
If you look at the coordinating board's analysis of how we use our space, we're one of 4 schools that's at 100 points. We right now have, according to the coordinating board, 1 million square foot deficit in terms of the space that we have at Texas State.
Right.
So we're using our space very
Do you have
efficiently.
any opportunity to grow it all on the campus footprint?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. We have spaces. We have a lovely space that we've reserved for an engineering and science building, and we're going to be going to the legislature this spring asking for funding for that.
And the regions are on board with that?
Well, we have a regent in the audience.
Well, I know,
here. I don't wanna
I'm trying
speak
not
for
to look at
them.
him, actually. Don't look at the regent when you ask this question, but
Yes,
I think he can hear you.
I think they are. I think
good.
they're very
Okay.
supportive.
So
Yes.
we've talked about 2 of the big 3 legs of the, you hear about 3 legs of the higher ed stool: access, affordability, and excellence. We've talked about access, we've talked about affordability. Let's talk about excellence. What is Texas State doing to make certain that the kids being turned out of this school have gotten a great education, not just an adequate education?
Well, first of all, I'm very proud of the fact that last January, the state of Texas reclassified us as an emerging research university.
Yep.
That reclassification is based on basically 3 metrics. And the first is having what they call a high-quality undergraduate student body. So I think they've told us we have a high-quality undergraduate student body, and I hope that we add value to that. It's also based on research and doctoral education, but it does start with your undergraduates. The fact that our students graduate, I think, is a very important metric.
Yep.
But also, they go on to get jobs, to get good jobs. They give back to their university because they're pleased. With the education they got, we just graduated, for example, our first class of nurses. We just started nursing a couple of years ago.
Right.
Just graduated our first class of nurses, got 100% on the licensure exam.
That's good.
It is.
We have a fan of nurses in the audience.
Good.
That's good.
We need nurses.
Good.
Well, so, you can drill down on a lot of different metrics, and I think what you see is that these
Right.
young people, they not only graduate, but they go on to do good things.
Let me ask the question differently, because it may have been my fault in not asking the question specifically enough. I understand the statistical piece of this, but I want to know, from the standpoint of the curriculum here, what are you doing to innovate? There's a time of great change, roiling change across the board in academia. I know that you, for instance, in a previous life have experience with online learning, distance learning.
Yes.
Clearly that's becoming part of a Swiss Army knife of options for kids in in institutions like this one. What is this university specifically doing to try to change out the ways things are typically done to make it so that the offerings here are creative and interesting and innovative?
Well, we talk a lot about online learning, and we do have a lot of programs and courses. I mean, we had about 22,000 enrollments in 3-hour courses last year online. But the other thing that we have is what is called course management software, where faculty, using a course management system that students have access to, post everything from their syllabi to their readings. They have chats, they have quizzes, sometimes they're on, a lot of times they're online, and over 90% of our courses use course management software.
Yep.
So a couple of years ago, for example, when we were all worried about avian flu, remember that? One of the things we realized is that you could close the whole university down and 90% of the courses would keep going because they are, for all intents and purposes, online.
Right.
And that tends to be what young people want.
Of course, that begs the question, President, why not do it? You know, less overhead. If you closed the university and you made it entirely a case where you could just, I mean, of course, I'm being ridiculous in the extreme for a reason, you know. If so much can be accomplished, and I want to ask you about that in a second because there's another side to that. If so much can be accomplished through online learning, why not emphasize that more as a way to reduce the overall cost of higher ed and therefore the cost of an education or a degree here?
Because it wouldn't work. We know that our students want face-to-face contact.
So it's that part of it that would be missing.
Yes, they want to sit in their dorm room in their pajamas and take their quizzes. There's no question about that.
Well, you hope they have their pajamas on, right? Fortunately, it's one way. That's how it goes.
But they also, that same day, want to come in, sit with a faculty member, and get advice, counsel, conversation.
And online learning can't replicate that.
You cannot. I would say that young people between 18 and 22, in my experience as a faculty member, the group of students who are in college right now need face-to-face contact more than any group I've ever seen.
Yep.
Yes, they love technology, but they want face-to-face advising. Think about the world they've grown up in.
Yep.
We have many parents in this room. Think of how you've interacted with these young people in high school. They've had very close relationships with their parents. And their parents have been they've been advisors.
Right.
They don't want to lose that. I had a young man in my office the other day who's in our honors college. Now, we have 1,200 students in our honors college, but still, they get a ton of one-on-one. And he wants to go to graduate school, and he's got a lot of faculty mentors. But he was very upset because not one of his mentors laid out a timeline for him and told him exactly, well, if you want to go to school in September, then the previous February you've got to do this, in January you've got to do that. And he expected that from a faculty member. And I think we've raised them to expect that from a faculty. So is online good for the substance, the coursework?
Right.
Yes. The soft skills, the advising, all of that,
harder.
They want
Of course, I would
one-on-one.
submit to you, President, that the reverse may become true as this generation of kids has grown up essentially with USB ports in their heads. These are the most technologically sophisticated kids.
Yes, they are.
You know, for them, intimacy happens at 140 characters at a time, you know. So the idea of an intimate relationship with a faculty member, there may be something to technology being a facilitator of that as we go forward.
There might be.
Yeah.
There might be. And students might sort themselves out in terms of where they want to go to school based on that.
Based on what's available. But, it would be both. It would be the in-person experience and online as opposed to either or. Let me ask you two more quick questions, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. I alluded earlier to the Texas State brand. The fact that in the higher ed constellation in Texas, sometimes UT and A&M suck all the air out of the room, and that it's easy to forget that there are other excellent universities and systems than those two. What do you do as a university to jump up and down and wave your arms and make more people aware of the good things undeniably going on this campus? We talked about water. The Meadow Center gift has obviously shined a big light on what is a vertical, not the only vertical brand, but a big vertical brand that differentiates this university from others. It's water research, studies, and so on. But what do? You're the president of, in essence, a little engine that could. It's sometimes tough to be that person.
Well, first of all, I think in higher education, there's a time lag between what you're doing and how you're perceived.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is. Maybe, let's just say 5 years.
Yeah.
So what we know is that what we're doing today may not pay off tomorrow, but it will pay off in 5 years. And we're doing a lot of different things across the whole spectrum. I mean, I think that tagline, the Rising Star of Texas, when we changed our name to Texas State University and adopted that tagline, I think that helped a lot. So we're doing a lot on the marketing end, no question about it. But you have to have a substance. There has to be a there.
You got to sell something.
That's right. And I think water is a perfect example of not just centers and PhD programs, but undergraduate programs and master's programs.
Right.
We are, in about 10 days, we're going to open a research park. Not something that most people would associate with our university, at least maybe not 10 years ago. That initially is combined with a PhD program in materials science, engineering, and commercialization, materials at the nano level. Do I think that the next day everybody in Texas is going to know that Texas State is doing nanomaterials? No.
But they'll get there.
But 5 years from now, we will be on the map for that.
Right.
And, you know, every time we graduate a successful nurse who goes out and has a job immediately, that helps the Texas State brand.
Gets the word out.
It certainly does.
Okay. You do have a region here. Region, I'm sorry to bust you for being here, but we do have a region here. And so I want to give you a free shot at the goal. Now he can't get up. He's here. And so you have the opportunity to tell him 1 or 2 or even 3 things on your wish list. If you ran the world, if you controlled the regions, what is it that you would want the regions to know are your priorities for the next 18 to 24 months at this university?
Well, I think he already knows this, but what I would like him to do
then tell us.
Is go with me as I go to the legislature and tell them the story of how we need instructional space at Texas State University.
So that's a big priority for you.
It is a huge priority, both in the San Marcos campus and on the Round Rock campus. We need buildings. We started a School of Engineering here about 5 years ago, and we are going to be in the strange position of having to cap enrollment for baccalaureate engineering a year from now if we don't get another building. That's crazy. The state needs baccalaureate engineers. The same thing with the Round Rock campus. What we've got up there is health professions. Health professions are booming right now as more and more of the baby boomers are retiring. And yet we don't have the instructional space to teach the programs we could teach. So that's one of them, just instructional space. The other is base funding. We need to have the base funding restored. I agree with you that tuition is getting too high. I mean, I think right now we're okay, but it can't go a lot higher. We need to have support. And the third thing I would say is Texas grants. Texas grants are a wonderful, wonderful mechanism to bring people into college.
Often first in their family to go to college, right?
Usually they are, first generation.
And yet that was cut pretty significantly in the last session.
It really was, and it made a difference. We saw it, and I think most schools
So
in
restoration
Texas
of the
did.
Texas grants program would be a priority of yours as well?
Those 3 things, instructional space, base funding, and Texas grants.
Regent, you knew this stuff, didn't you? Okay, good, excellent. Just checking. Well, that's good. All right. Well, very well. President, you're very kind to sit with me today. Before we open it up for questions, let me just say thank you again for your hospitality, and thank you specifically for this conversation.
You're welcome.
Very well. President Trauth, thank you.